Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to 6A, 6B, or 6G. Today we're going to be doing chapters 10 and 11 of our book, Because of Winn, Dixie. In the background that you see here are the multiple settings of the fictitious city known as Naomi, Florida. We know that the author herself did live in Florida and went to school in Florida. And I'll just move my head and you can see some of the background and some of the settings there. And you can see that church place, and you can see the library where she met that one individual. You can see the trailer park in the top right-hand corner, the pet store with Otis, Gloria Dump's house in the bottom right-hand corner. We can see the school in the bottom left-hand corner. So that is a good snapshot of all the settings that we see in this book so far. However, that being said, chapters 10 and 11 take place in specific settings. And the first setting that I'm going to show you is Gloria Dump's backyard. I chose a scene from the movie where we have Opal here, Winn Dixie and Gloria Dump doing something in the soil there. And we'll figure that out as we read together today. I'm going to put up chapter 10. We're going to start off with this massive paragraph here, and I'll begin to start reading. All right, guys, here we go. I told Gloria Dump everything. I told her how me and the preacher had just moved to Naomi and how I had to leave all my friends behind. I told her about my mama leaving, and I listed out the 10 things that I knew about her. And I explained that here in Naomi, I missed Mama more than I ever had in Watley. I told her about the preacher being like a turtle. There's a simile there. She's comparing her father to a turtle, hiding all the time inside his shell. I told her about finding Winn Dixie in the produce department and how, because of him, I became friends with Miss Franny Block and got a job working for a man named Otis at Gertrude's Pets, and got invited to Sweetie Pie Thomas's birthday party. I even told Gloria Dump how Dunlop and Stevie Dewberry called her a witch, but I told her they were stupid, mean, bald-headed boys, and I didn't believe them, not for long anyhow. And the whole time I was talking, Gloria Dump was listening. She was nodding her head and smiling and frowning and saying, and is that right? I could feel her listening with all her heart, and it felt good. That's a specific skill set, is listening. A lot of people hear things, like they hear sound, but they don't actually listen. It's a really good skill to have. You know what, she said when I was all done? What? Could be that you got more of your mama in you than just red hair and freckles and running fast. Really? I said, like what? Like maybe you got a green thumb. The green thumb is an idiom. If you don't know what a green thumb is, it's not actually a literal green thumb. Green thumb means, if you have a green thumb, it means you're really good at planting. You are one with nature. You are a naturalist. You like to grow things. The two of us could plant something and see how it grows. Test your thumb out. Okay, I said. What Gloria Dump picked for me to grow was a tree, or she said it was a tree. To me, it looked more like a plant. She had me dig a hole for it and put it in the ground and pat the dirt around it tight like it was a baby and I was tucking it into bed. What kind of tree is it? I asked Gloria Dump. It's a wait and see tree. What's that mean? It means you gotta wait for it to grow before you know what it is. Can I come back and see it tomorrow? I asked. Child, she said, as long as this is my garden, you're welcome in it. But that tree ain't going to have changed much by tomorrow. But I want to see it too, I said. Humph, said Gloria Dump. I ain't going nowhere. I'd be right here. I woke up Winn Dixie up then. He had peanut butter in his whiskers and he kept yawning and stretching. He licked Gloria's Dump hand before we left and I thanked her. That night, when the preacher was tucking me into bed, I told him how I got a job at Gertrude's Pets, and I told him all about making friends with Miss Franny Block and getting invited to Sweetie Pie's party. And I told him about meeting Gloria Dump, when Dixie lay on the floor waiting for the preacher to leave so he could hop up on the bed like he always did. When I was done talking, the preacher kissed me good night, and then he leaned way over and gave Winn Dixie a kiss too, right on the top of the head. You can go ahead and get up there now, he said to Winn Dixie. Winn Dixie looked at the preacher. He didn't smile at him, but he opened his mouth wide like he was laughing, like the preacher had just told him the funniest joke in the world. And this is what amazed me the most. The preacher laughed back. When Dixie hopped on the bed and the preacher got up and turned out the light, I leaned over and kissed Winn Dixie too, right on the nose. But he didn't notice. He was already asleep and snoring. All right, so that's chapter 10, and most of it, as you can see, takes place in the backyard. We can see the Gloria Dump character here, Opal and Winn Dixie. And we're going to set the stage for chapter 11, and it's a different background. Something does happen, and I'm just going to pick the background here. So we're in a trailer park setting, and as you can see, there's a lot of clouds in the sky. And if anyone's ever visited Florida, you can attest that there's thunderstorms that happen really quick, like really fierce ones for like half an hour, really fierce, and then it gets sunny all of a sudden. It's the weather changes and really quickly, and then it changes back really quickly. And so that sets the scene for chapter 11. So as we can see here, we're in a trailer park and we got those palm trees in the background there. So I'm just going to, again, share the screen with you, and we're going to continue on with chapter 11 in this book. So moving right along. Chapter 11. That night there was a real bad thunderstorm, but what woke me up wasn't the thunder and lightning. It was Winn Dixie whining and butting his head against my bedroom door. Winn Dixie, I said, "What are you doing?" He didn't pay attention to me. He just kept beating his head against the door and whining and whimpering. And when I got out of bed and went over and put my hand on his head, he was shaking and trembling so hard that it scared me. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around him, but he didn't turn and look at me, or smile, or sneeze, or wag his tail, or do anything normal kind of Winn Dixie thing. He just kept beating his head against the door and crying and shaking. As you can see here, the use of the semicolon. It adds two independent sentences together. Okay, you can only use that semicolon when there's two sentences that can stand on their own. But what they do is they put this here to kind of link the two sentences together. So good tool to use when you're writing. "You want the door open?" I said. "Huh? Is that what you want?" I stood up and opened the door. When Dixie flew through it like something big and ugly and mean was chasing him. "Winn Dixie," I hissed, "come back here." I didn't want him going and waking the preacher up. But it was too late. Winn Dixie was already at the other end of the trailer in the preacher's room. I could tell there was a spring sound that must have come from Winn Dixie jumping up on the bed. And then there was a sound from the preacher like he was real surprised. But none of it lasted long, because Winn Dixie came tearing back out of the preacher's room, panting and running like crazy. I tried to grab him, but he was going too fast. This word here, sproing, the sproing sound, this is a literary term called onomatopoeia. It's when the sound actually spells out the word, onomatopoeia. "Opal," said the preacher. He was standing at the door to his bedroom, and his hair was all kind of wild on top of his head. And he was looking around like he wasn't sure where he was. "Opal, what's going on?" "I don't know," I told him. But just then there was a huge crack of thunder, one so loud that it shook the whole trailer. And when Dixie came shooting back out of my room, I went running past me and I screamed, "Daddy, watch out!" But the preacher was still confused. He stood there, and when Dixie came barreling right toward him like he was a bowling ball. We have another simile. They're comparing Winn Dixie to a bowling ball and the speed of the bowling ball. And the preacher was the only pin, and they're comparing the preacher to a pin left standing, and wham, they both fell to the ground. So again, another simile where they're comparing the characters of the preacher and Winn Dixie. Winn Dixie is the bowling pin, or sorry, Winn Dixie is the bowling ball, and the preacher's the bowling pin, and Winn Dixie knocks him over. "Uh-oh," I said. "Opal," said the preacher. He was lying on his stomach, and Winn Dixie was sitting on top of him, panting and whining. "Yes, sir," I said. "Opal," the preacher said again. "Yes, sir," I said louder. "Do you know what a pathological fear is?" Now, pathological is something to do like a physical condition of the mind, which affects your way of thinking. And a fear, we know what fear is, like we're afraid of something. This is almost like a phobia, which means you're scared of something. "No, sir," I told him. The preacher raised a hand. He rubbed his nose. "Well," he said after a minute, "it's a fear that goes way beyond normal fears, like a phobia. It's a fear you can't be talked out of or reasoned out of." That's interesting. Everyone has phobias. I know some people it's arachnophobia, or which is the fear of spiders, or agoraphobia, which is the fear of public marketplaces or being next to people. Lots of different fears. What's your fear? Do you actually have a phobia? Just then, there was another crack of thunder when Dixie rose straight up in the air like somebody had poked him with something hot. When he hit the floor, he started running. He ran back to my bedroom. I didn't even try to catch him. I just got out of the way. Again, another semicolon, linking two independent thoughts in a full sentence, that this could stand on its own, but it's better when it's attached to the previous sentence. The preacher lay on the ground, rubbing his nose. Finally, he sat up. He said, "Opal, I believe Winn-Dixie has a pathological fear of thunderstorms." And just when he finished his sentence, here came Winn-Dixie again, running to save his life. I got the preacher up off the floor and out of the way just in time. There didn't seem to be a thing we could do for Winn-Dixie to make him feel better. Or we just sat there and watched him run back and forth, all terrorized and panting. And every time there was another crack of thunder, Winn-Dixie acted all over again, like it was surely the end of the world. The storm won't last, the preacher told me. And when it's over, the real Winn-Dixie will come back. After a while, the storm did end. The rain stopped, and there wasn't any more lightning. And finally, the last rumble of thunder went away, and Winn-Dixie quit running back and forth and came over to where me and the preacher were sitting and cocked his head like he was saying, "What in the world are you two doing out of bed in the middle of the night?" And then he crept up on the couch with us in this funny way he was, where he gets on the couch an inch at a time, kind of sliding himself onto it, looking off in a different direction, like it's all happening by accident, like he doesn't intend to get on the couch, but all of a sudden, there he is. And so the three of us sat there. I rubbed Winn-Dixie's head and scratched him behind the ears the way he liked, and the preacher said, "There are an awful lot of thunderstorms in Florida in the summertime." "Yes, sir," I said. I was afraid that maybe he would say we couldn't keep a dog who went crazy with pathological fear every time there was a crack of thunder. "Well, we'll have to keep an eye on him," the preacher said. He put his arm around Winn-Dixie. "We'll have to make sure he doesn't get out during the storm. He might run away. We have to make sure we keep him safe." "Yes, sir," I said again. All of a sudden, it was hard for me to talk. I've loved the preacher so much. I loved him because he loved Winn-Dixie. I loved him because he was going to forgive Winn-Dixie for being afraid. But most of all, I loved him for putting his arm around Winn-Dixie like that, like he was already trying to keep him safe. All right, some reflections that we have of chapter 10 and 11 from the book Because of Winn-Dixie. So going back to our setting here, we have chapter 10 in Gloria Dump's house back here. My body's blocking it, but back here, Gloria Dump's house in the back right-hand corner, and then really in the trailer park in the top right-hand corner in chapter 11 here. So some reflections. Obviously, we talked about just the two settings just 2 seconds ago, so we know what the settings are. Really, there's no new characters. We can see that Opal is bonding with Gloria Dump, growing things in the ground and really giving her heart to her and her story and talking to her. And also, we also have Opal opening up to her father in chapter 11. So some character development is really important at this point of the book. One word I do want to throw out there is a big word, which means precocious. It's not really a negative word. A lot of people say it is, but it's not a negative word. It basically means like certain habits or mindset or thoughts or proclivities that children have that are advanced beyond their age. We know in one lens, Opal is very precocious in the company she chooses to hang around. We know that she hangs around Gloria Dump and I think Franny Block and Otis, and also her father. A lot of her friends are considered adults and not her own peer grouping other than Sweetie Pie. And maybe that has a lot to do with Opal's character. She's seeking certain people for certain reasons, and we're beginning to figure that out. Why is Opal choosing all of these people to become friends with? Most of us probably wouldn't do this, so it's something to think about. And we also can see the blossoming of a better relationship between Opal and her father, where she actually states that she does love her dad, and that her dad, when showing affection to Winn Dixie, Opal appreciates it, because much of Opal's life is wrapped up around Winn Dixie, and her father is sharing in it. So some good reflections, for sure. So that about sums up chapter 10 and 11. There won't be a discussion question today, obviously. On Friday, we're going to be going over chapters 12 and 13, and there will be a discussion question. And then you will be submitting your first 4 discussion questions, and hopefully I'll go over those on the weekend and get those back to you as soon as possible. We'll talk about how to submit those come Friday. I will provide a sheet that has the 4 questions on there for those of you who didn't go back and forth, and you may have missed a discussion question. So that'll be available for you. So again, moving right along in the book, we're almost halfway. By Friday, we'll be halfway. So thank you very much for joining me today. Again, stay safe. I hope everything's going well with your family and your friends, and have a good day. All right, guys, see you later. And like I said before, keep safe.